So, whales are, in my own humble opinion, one of the most amazing animals to have ever lived on this planet. They include the largest animals to have ever existed on this planet. Blue whales weigh twice as much as the next largest whale, fin whales, which are about the same size as the largest estimates of dinosaurs in the form of the sauropods. And whales are so uniquely adapted to their environment, being an obligate aquatic. A lot of people kind of forget that being a mammal and being a tetrapod, they had to have come from somewhere. And a lot of people don't really realize that whales did not start out as water-based animals. While there aren't any observable features in whales today that hint at their terrestrial origins, they do have some key features internally that can lead us all the way back to a time when whales walked. Welcome back to Paleopedia, and the evolution of whales is one of my favorite things to discuss to people who don't really know much about it. Not only do whales represent the most successful transition from one lifestyle to another, their transition was really quickly, spanning only about a dozen million years at the most. Now, for a while, scientists have guessed that cetaceans originated from terrestrial life forms because in cetacean skeletons, they do have remnants of their back legs in the form of a very small vestigial hip bone. But it wasn't until 1981 that paleontologists made a discovery that pretty much confirmed that whales started out as terrestrial animals about 50 million years ago in Pakistan. Measuring about 2 meters in length and weighing maybe 100 to 150 pounds, this animal, which has been given the name of Pakicetus, meaning Pakistan's whale, at first glance does not look like a whale. I mean, just look at the thing. It looks more wolf-like than anything else, with 4 functional limbs, a long tail, and a long snout filled with teeth. Not exactly a similar design to what we now understand are its descendants. But despite the initial appearances, this is in fact the oldest representative of whales that we have in the fossil record, and it all comes down to one very particular adaptation inside its skull. So with most tetrapod animals, these being the reptiles, birds, mammals, and amphibians, almost all of them have an inner ear hollow cavity referred to generally as an auditory bulla. Generally, because I don't really want to get into the inner workings of how ears operate, the auditory bulla is the enclosed space that covers the central and inner ear, and is generally there for protection of that inner ear. And in most mammals, with the exception of old world primates and humans, the auditory bulla is visible as an actual bulge on either side of the base of the skull. And in just about every animal that does have an auditory bulla, it's a thin layer of bone. It's not anything substantial, except for in whales. Cetaceans rely primarily on their hearing throughout their lives, and the auditory bulla in cetaceans is very thick compared to other animals, let alone just mammals. In whales, the auditory bulla is, comparative to every other animal that has one, really thick, which is a key adaptation for them to hear as well as they do underwater. And this adaptation is only seen in cetaceans. There are no other animals alive today or extinct from the fossil record that have this enlarged, thickened auditory bulla. So we can use that to track their evolutionary history. And when paleontologists looked at the fossilized skull of Pakicetus, they found this exact same thickened auditory bulla, all but confirming that Pakicetus is the first representative of whale evolution. And from what we understand, Pakicetus represents that initial transitional phase from being fully terrestrial to going into the aquatic lifestyle that whales now have. Because of this larger, thickened auditory bulla present in Pakicetus, it's probable that this animal spent a lot of its time in the water. And there are some other physical characteristics of Pakicetus that lead to the idea that it was beginning that transitional phase from terrestrial to aquatic, specifically with its eyes. The eyes of Pakicetus are positioned towards the top of the skull, angled more upwards, indicating that this animal spent a lot of its time looking up, which is actually a key adaptation in a lot of different aquatic animals, like crocodilians. The positioning of the eyes, the auditory bulla, and a couple other features like its bones being a little bit more osteosclerotic or denser, all leads to the idea that Pakicetus represents a transition from terrestrial to aquatic lifestyle, spending a lot of its time underwater. Coincidentally, the discovery of Pakicetus gave us a great insight into how whales relate to other animals on the evolutionary tree. Towards the beginning of this video, I mentioned that Pakicetus looks more wolf-like than like a whale, but Pakicetus was not related to wolves at all. Originally, Pakicetus was classified as a mesonychid because of the hoof-like appendages at the end of each toe on its foot. Pakicetus didn't have claws like other carnivores like dogs, cats, and bears. But in 2001, fossils of later whales had ankle bones with a double pulley mechanism, which are similar to artiodactyls or the even-toed ungulates. So these would be animals like giraffes, bison and cows, deer, camels, and boars. These findings, along with a redescription of a similar animal to Pakicetus called Indohyus from the Himalayas around the same time, cemented cetaceans as being highly derived ungulates, specifically artiodactyls. This means that some of the closest relatives to cetaceans are animals like cows, bison, and pigs. However, none of those animals are the closest living relatives to whales. The discovery of Indohyus gave us that answer, and it turns out whales are most closely related to hippos. Indohyus is an animal from the Himalayas around the same time as Pakicetus, and it basically lived the exact same lifestyle as Pakicetus. From what I understand, and I could be wrong on this, it was originally believed that Indohyus was the direct ancestor to Pakicetus, but now it's believed that Indohyus and Pakicetus share a common ancestor, and each one are the earliest representatives of the split from that common ancestor. Where Indohyus leaned more into negative buoyancy with thicker, denser bones and eventually evolved into modern-day hippos, Pakicetus evolved to become more carnivorous and began to rely on active swimming methods similar to otters, eventually becoming the whales that we know today. Overall, Pakicetus is an incredibly important discovery for paleontologists to better understand exactly how life as a whole evolved after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Pakicetus represents the beginning of an incredibly rapid evolutionary change from being fully terrestrial animals to obligate aquatics completely unable to come out on land for any real amount of time. After the appearance of Pakicetus in the fossil record, it took whales no more than about 12 million years to become completely aquatic animals in the form of the basilosaurids and the dorodontines. All of this just highlights how important it is that we continue doing paleontology and studying exactly how life used to live on this planet so we can better yet understand not just where life comes from and how modern animals evolved, but also where we came from and how we fit into the history of life. And hopefully with more studies and more findings, we can better understand exactly what it was like during the time that whales walked the earth.